one of the questions I just want to jump straight in with. I came across your videos a few months back through a friend of mine, actually the same friend who got me, connected with Gavin McInnes, who I spoke to earlier in the year. Um, I was completely blown away by, watching these sort of segments on Sky News and things like that. And I was like, who is this person who can just talk like this and say these things and, wind these people up in these ways? I was just like, oh my gosh. And I just wanted to throw this question at you, which is basically, are you one of the most interesting people on the planet right now, or have we all just become really utterly dull and boring?
I love the "Why are you so awesome?" questions. It's always my favorite way to start an interview.
I unashamedly a fan. I just can't say it any other way.
Well, that's very kind of you. Thank you. Do you know what I think is interesting at the moment with the sort of the Milo project, if you like? There are a number of communities on the internet and a number of people in society who feel as though they're not really being listened to and they're not being represented. And these aren't just sort of weirdos and losers and sort of bizarre people. It's sort of ordinary young men of about 20 who are discovering that the world does not reflect the universe that the media and that feminism paints. It's people who like video games. It's the so-called manosphere. There's a huge constituency of people out there in the world, throughout the West actually, who are finding themselves very badly represented by by the media, by politicians, and by the academy. And I seem to speak to all of them at once. And there are people with TV shows, there are people with higher profiles than mine, there are people with more followers than me, but I seem to be the only person who speaks to a huge swathe of these deeply disaffected and unhappy people who have been lied about for more than a decade, really, by a sort of progressive media establishment in a variety of different ways. And yeah, I mean, I thank you for the compliment, and I enjoy doing the TV stuff because I get to be sassy and
Yeah,
bitchy and nuts. But I
yeah.
think most of this really is just building on the work of stuff that other people have done before. I like to come to arguments with two main approaches. One is machine gunning with facts, because feminists don't like facts very much. Progressives in general don't like facts very much. And two, I take full advantage of the progressive identity politics consensus. I'm not supposed to exist. I'm a sort of sassy, conservative, Catholic, homosexual. And if you're gay, you're supposed to believe, you're supposed to vote for the left. You're supposed to believe, that climate change is the worst thing that's ever happened to the planet, that, Muslims are all victims, that women are an oppressed class, that, the only way to save black communities in America is Black Lives Matter. I don't believe any of those things. And so the issue for me is, with these supposedly forbidden opinions as a homosexual, I too, like the young men that I write about, exist outside of the sort of politically correct consensus. So I'm a sort of unlikely champion for them, but in another respect, it's understandable how I've kind of made common cause, whether it's with gamers or the men's rights activists or the young men in college who are getting bombarded with these messages that they're all potential rapists. It's understandable to me how we might have sort of forged an alliance in a way.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I did sort of want to make the comment, as you sort of said yourself, it does seem like you're very much this unlikely hero that's come in to save the day on these sort of issues. It's quite funny
I
to
always
just...
thought of myself as more of a supervillain than a superhero, but nobody else agreed.
It's subjective. It's completely...
Nobody else agreed. I suppose I'm a supervillain to the bad guys.
Exactly, exactly. So, I mean, it's funny to me. I did hear you say somewhere, I can't remember where I heard it, you sort of jokingly made the comment that, God had made you gay so that you could fight all these feminists and social justice warriors.
I think I said it on Twitter, yeah.
And it was quite telling as well in the interview you did with Dave Rubin, where he felt the need to point out twice the fact that you were gay and conservative. I just thought that was really interesting, that he sort of... It's quite telling to me, like you sort of say, that you don't fit the narrative, that you don't fit this prescribed, you like you say, you're not supposed to exist sort of thing.
No, and Dave Rubin is a great enlightened guy. He's a cultural libertarian, classical liberal, but even he has sort of soaked up some of that weird progressive thinking. Even he finds it surprising, or at least thinks his viewers need it pointed out multiple times, that it is possible, somebody can be a gay person and a conservative is extraordinary.
Yeah.
What we actually know from the surveys, what we know from the way people vote, is that gay people are split quite evenly down the political line. In the last election, The Guardian in Britain surveyed gay men, 50% of whom said they were voting Conservative. It was The Guardian reported with horror. But I suppose if you want to understand what I try to do in the media and what the sorts of articles I write and the debates that I like to have in universities and on TV, the way to understand me is I talk for everybody else. We're very used to hearing a particular and narrow set of opinions on television. And they're generally the opinions of, minorities who want to complain whilst not having very much to complain about, women who want to whinge whilst not having very much to whinge about, and a variety of left-wingers from the soft left out to the crazy, batshit, insane, socialists that are now the opposition party in Britain. I sort of speak for everyone else, for the common sense majority in Middle England or maybe in America who don't live on the coasts, and elsewhere, elsewhere in Canada and Australia, New Zealand, for people sitting at home watching their TVs thinking, these guys are speaking another language. They're not describing the world I live in. I don't recognize the world that they paint. And they're speaking another language, and I wish somebody would come along and be entertaining and interesting and tell them all that they're all tossers. So that's what I try to do.
Brilliant. I mean, as I said, I wasn't that keen as such to dive so deeply into the whole feminism thing, but then, like I mentioned to you, I did watch that recent debate you did on that college campus, and I was kind of keen to hear a little bit about maybe your inner monologue that was going on during that, because it was just unreal to me. Like, the guy who was mediating it, there was a couple of times where he literally stopped you mid-sentence and was like, you can't say that, you can't say that. And I was like, you must have been furious.
No, I don't get mad. But
really?
But I do find it entertaining on the
I was just like, if that was
safe
me,
space policy. I had to ask whether it was a violation of the university's safe space policy to criticize the university's safe space policy. Now, in case you don't know, safe space policies on university are sort of superficially designed to avoid anybody getting upset or victimized or becoming targets of harassment. Really, their function is to silence dissenting or unfashionable political points of view, and to privilege certain groups on campus so that they never have to go to a debate or an event or read a book that might hurt their feelings. We have this thing called hate facts, like sort of inconvenient things that are true that you might not want to hear. They're called hate facts. And safe spaces are designed to insulate idiots from hate facts, so they never have to encounter an argument that is different from their own or facts that might contradict the narrative that they have grown up believing. Now, most universities have a set of codes of conduct and safe space rules, which sound perfectly reasonable. They're couched in terms of abuse and harassment and all the rest of it. What they basically boil down to is don't hurt people's feelings, which, of course, is profoundly anti-intellectual. It is contrary to the entire purpose of education. You come to university to have your horizons broadened, not narrowed. You come to university, especially if you're showing up for a liberal arts subject, precisely to have your feelings hurt and your opinions challenged and your facts questioned. And if you don't want to do any of those things, you've demonstrated that you're not capable of fulfilling the requirements of your course, and you should be expelled. Now, I was subject to this sort of safe space policy. The funny thing about these safe space policies is nobody really knows how to enforce them. Nobody knows what you are and what you're not allowed to say. So I got stopped for saying the word kooky. I said, I said something like kooky liberal dogma. He said, "Oh, you can't say that." And I said, "What do you mean? What did I do now?" I said, "Well, you said kooky." I said, "I can't say kooky." What's wrong with kooky? Because they don't know what you're they don't even know how to enforce their own rules, because they don't know what their own rules are. All they really know is that if you say something that might potentially upset or offend a woman, you've broken the rules. But they couldn't tell you what those rules actually are.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about not being mad, because I guess when you think about it, it's so laughable. Like, how can you get mad at that?
My life is full of laughs. My life is full of such joy. Honestly, I get up in the morning and I'm so happy that feminism exists. I'm so happy that the batty,
it's
crazy,
the yin and yang.
dare I say it, kooky, progressive left exists, because I don't know what I'd do otherwise. I have so much fun with these crazy people
Yeah.
So no, this is why I don't get mad, because you can't lose against them. If you have a modicum of intelligence, you cannot lose, because they're so stupid and so uncharismatic, and and incapable of understanding logic and reason. And they're so much fun to debate because they're so hopeless.
Yeah. I think, just to push back a little bit, because I noticed there's a couple of interviews I've seen where, on the one hand, it is abundantly clear that you're having a great time. I saw I think you posted a photo, or someone put a photo on Twitter of you walking into that debate on that college campus. And I actually tweeted, I don't know if you saw it, I was like, there's the face of a man who knows he's already won.
I never missed a tweet of yours. Of course I did.
I was like, it's incredible. But there have been, I think it was, there's a UK TV show where you sort of debate these big ideas, or these questions, and there was a clip I saw recently where you could see there were some issues that were coming to light, that you were talking about things like the male suicide epidemic and things like that, and there is clearly an element, to me it seems, of genuine empathy in what you do, as well as having a great time.
Oh, well, I won't claim for a second that I'm not sincere in what I'm doing. And in fact, I toiled in the wilderness for many years, not being very fashionable, not being very popular, when I was talking about stuff like this and sort of the silliness of feminists and all the rest of it. I was a bit before my time in that respect. I was writing, whatever it was, 2008 for the Telegraph newspaper, men are better at some technology jobs. What's the big deal? Why should we apologize for it? And it was a bit before its time. Nobody was ready to hear it then. And then there were a few intervening years when nobody really wanted to know. And so I kept on and I carried on. Now seems to be my time. And when I speak sometimes directly to the audience, as I did in my closing at the University of Bristol debate.
That was amazing. That was amazing.
Well, it's nice of you to say. You're right, of course. When I do things like that and take a moment to address the audience directly, I'm very often speaking from the heart, and I like to have a lot of fun, and I like to BTFO the feminists, which your readers can Google because I think it's probably too rude to say. And it's hugely joyful, but I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't believe in it, because there are a hell of a lot easier ways to be popular, famous, and wealthy than taking on the feminist establishment. That's about the number one way to make yourself unpopular, unhireable, and untouchable. Yeah. Now, I seem to have done okay out of it because I've got this nice balance of being sassy, funny, mischievous, and of course being a homosexual. So they can't get me on misogyny. Yeah. They can't get me on sexism because I never shut up about black boyfriends. They can't get me on misogyny. They can't get me on sexism, not really. Yeah. They can't get me on anything. So they tried their hardest, but somehow I seem to have survived their attempts to discredit me, and my career's doing pretty well. But obviously, I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't believe it. And I think the takeaway from most of what I do, whether it's the video game stuff or the feminism stuff or whatever, is that the pendulum of equality has swung far too far in the other direction, and that young men are in a really bad way, and young men are suffering and struggling, and somebody's got to do something about it because nobody seems to care. The male suicide epidemic is resurgent. Samaritans told us recently that male suicide's back to the levels it was at in 2001. Men are checking out of society, retreating into porn and video games, what's called men going their own way, or I call it the sexodus. There are many signs that men are in crisis, and women are going to suffer too if that's the case, because they're not going to have any boyfriends. So there's reason and motivation for us all to fix this, and we are all in this together, and we should all work to fix it together. And my chief complaint is with a sort of man-hating, lesbianic, sociopathic modern third-wave feminism that it doesn't seem to be fighting for equality for women. It seems to be, as Christina Hoff Sommers would put it, a sort of female chauvinism. It seems to be female supremacy. And, as a gay man, I can say this. I'm not sure what women are better at, but it's certainly not winning debates against me.
Yeah, it's a surprise to me that, I'm assuming most of these people know who you are before they talk to you. And it's amazing to me that they still choose to be honest. Well, they don't. I can't tell you because it would be indecorous, but there are so many feminists who refuse to debate me on Sky News and on TV. That's the reason I'm not on TV so much these days, because nobody will go on with me because they're scared they'll lose. Cowards. Yeah.
So instead,
Yeah.
instead I have my YouTube channel, and I've got, I get hundreds of thousands of views on that, and obviously my columns go to hundreds of thousands of people. I don't have any worry about my reach and influence at all, with or without the TV. But no, one of the problems of getting me on to debate things is that so many feminists say no
Yeah.
because they're worried about losing. For the people like Rebecca Reed who don't have much of a media profile, it's not really it's not too much of a risk, because if I beat her, it doesn't really matter, because nobody knows who she is, and it's fair enough. You got beaten by Milo, no great humiliation. So does everybody else. Then again, if they hold their own, or even if they beat me, that's a huge. It's a huge benefit. It's a huge benefit to them and to their profile. It's a huge professional notch on their bedpost if they manage to beat. Now, of course, so far none of them have, but that's why very often the feminists who agree to debate me are quite junior, and the people for whom it would be a huge, blistering humiliation if I embarrass them on national television won't come anywhere near me.
Yeah. It's interesting, I guess, just to sort of back up a little bit, for those who aren't sort of familiar with some of the terms that get thrown around, like, for example, the term social justice warrior, that was kind of a new term for me to hear. Like, can you sort of unpack your definition of what a social justice warrior is?
Yeah, of course. People are divided, particularly on the internet, but I think in life generally, more by authoritarianism and libertarianism than by left and right, or by religious and non-religious, or by any ethnic or sexual boundaries. The way I choose to describe how people are different is that there are people who want to run how everyone else lives, the sort of bullies, nannies, pearl clutchers, and they might be from the right or from the left. They may be the old religious right who don't like homosexuals and want to, stop and hate video games and all the rest of it. Or they could be from the modern progressive left who believe in the sort of cult of diversity at all costs and these weird quotas, and don't realize that a lot of what they're doing is actually destructive to the minorities they claim to be helping. And that particular impulse on the modern progressive left, that authoritarianism, that desire to control language and control how other people live, and in particular the demonization and vilification and ridicule of anyone who doesn't agree with them, is it comes from a class of people that we now call social justice warriors. And it's a term designed to evoke how self-important they are, because they're all terribly arrogant and they all think they're saving the world by making sure that we all use the right pronouns for trannies. But what really am I allowed to say that on your show? I don't know.
Yeah. I think Gavin McInnes said every curse word possible, so you're fine.
Oh, you've had Gavin, so I'm fine.
Yeah.
I should ask these things at the beginning, because if you've had Gavin. If your listeners have suffered through, I should say suffered through, if your listeners have enjoyed Gavin McInnes, then I'm a pussycat.
It was one of our most popular episodes for a long time.
Sure it was. He's such a firecracker. Anyway, so these people who want to sort of stomp their feet, control how other people live, bully, demonize, and ridicule anyone who doesn't agree with them, these are the social justice warriors. And if you've ever been told that your language is problematic, or you've ever been told that you're saying something that could be really offensive to certain minorities, even if those minorities aren't anywhere in the room and aren't anywhere nearby and are likely never to hear you. If you've ever been corrected about a weird and obscure gender issue, or told that you really ought to say that Caitlyn Jenner is stunning and brave, even if you don't think that she is. If you've ever wondered why Vanity Fair will post pictures of overweight women and congratulate them for being so brave, then you have come into contact with the phenomenon of social justice. And the social justice warriors, being the primary scourge in our culture these days, are the people that Gavin and I and others like to poke fun at, and occasionally show up and trounce in debates too.
Yeah, well, on the subject of Gavin, it was interesting to me, the experience that I had after we posted that episode, because you sort of mentioned there, the whole issue of being obesity and overweight. I am overweight myself, and I made the mistake of talking to Gavin through video on Skype, and he quite, as he does, he made the observation, to my face, he actually said to me, "Are you trying to kill yourself?" Which I thought was quite blunt. I mean, that's him. And what? It's so
see that my natural instinct is to laugh rather than be shocked by that. So
totally. No, but the thing is, I wasn't offended at all. I wasn't offended at the time. I was, and it's that thing where
of your own choices. I mean, you don't really have the right to be offended. If somebody's commenting on your life choices, then suck it up. Now, there is some, I don't know. So I'll tell you, this is interesting because I was discussing this today with somebody. Public shaming can work, but it only works, apparently, the research says it only works in certain circumstances. So I don't know how motivating you find it when people like Gavin sort of ridicule.
Well, I found it motivating for about a week.
Right. Well, here's the interesting thing. This week on the London Underground, which is our subway system, the tube, men were handing out cards to women that basically said, "You're fat, and I resent having to pay more for you for the NHS, and you're a public health liability, and you look gross. Sort your life out." And women were sort of getting upset, crying at these things. I was fully in support of these cards because I'm a firm believer that public fat shaming isn't just a moral imperative, but an aesthetic one too, because I don't want to see that everywhere I go. Now, what the research, however, unfortunately, is only partially on Gavin's side and partially on my side. It suggests that if your friends are mostly thin and you hang out with beautiful people, shaming will work. So, because you're constantly comparing yourself to people who you respect and admire and you want to please and impress them. And the likelihood is that if you hang out with a lot of people who work out and who look good, you will respond well to public censure. Whereas if you are surrounded by enablers or other overweight people or people that you don't particularly admire or respect or find attractive, shaming has the opposite effect, and it sort of helps for a little bit, and then you kind of collapse into comfort eating and into feeling suppression and your sort of previous gluttonous lazy ways. Yours meaning somebody's, not you.
It's fine. I've dealt with Gavin. Anything from here is fine.
Well, this is why I love Gavin. He sort of softens the path ahead. I don't have to feel like, you see, I am so used in my life to feeling like the bad guy. I feel, I've always been the bad boy in the room, and now with Gavin as a friend, I always make sure Gavin goes on these shows first because I suddenly, for the first time in my life, come across as the voice of reason. It's great.
Yeah, totally.
I for the first time in my life, I come across as compassionate. Now, there is reason to suppose that, as I say, who you surround yourself with has an effect on whether public shaming works on you. But if, as I'm sure, as a man who clearly has taste and good judgment, you surround yourself with interesting and beautiful people, shaming is probably not the worst thing in the world for you.
Yeah, there's sort of, I know I invited that whole conversation about weight, but anyway.
You did, and I'm sorry, but you brought it up, so I ran with it.
No, it's fine. That was me venting from my experience with Gavin, so. No, but as I say, in all seriousness, I wasn't offended at all, and it does remind, we obviously had that video on YouTube come out with that girl, Nicole Arbour, the Dear Fat People video, which I'm sure you did see.
I love it so much.
Yeah. But it's the thing about it is the response is it's the same response that you seem to get with things like feminism because they have no logical comeback to. It is a health issue. I'm saying it as someone who is in this category. It is my choice. It is a health issue, and all they could do was slander her character. They had nothing to say about the logical reasoning. Reasonable
well, of course.
Points.
You understand what people get the most upset about. You know what the thing people get more upset about than anything else?
What's that?
The truth.
Yeah.
People get upset about things that are true, that they can't deny or debate or challenge because they really don't have an argument. So they retreat into the ad hominem, they retreat into insults and slurs, they try to discredit the speaker by digging up things about their past or calling them names. This is what the left does. They call you a misogynist or a bigot or a racist or a sexist because they know these allegations are career ending and they know that they're scary and they know that most people, if they can be sold on the fact that somebody is a bigot, will not stand around to hear what their arguments might be. So they try to discredit anything you might have to say with these sorts of tactics. As far as offence taking goes, I've never been offended. I have, in fact, never been offended. And I think I might be the only person alive who has never been offended. I think I don't know anybody else who can claim they have, but I don't understand. I don't know if it's something wrong in my head that I wasn't born with, which has made me good at this job. Something that I don't have that other human beings have, but I just never felt offended, and I don't understand what it is. I have never felt this instinct to get upset because somebody said something true. I've never. Yeah. I don't know what these people. I don't know what the feeling is that these people are describing when they say they're offended.
It's interesting that you say it like that, though, to say you've never been offended, because I think, to me, offense is almost tied with convictions. Like, you know, what your convictions are dictate what offends you, right? So I mean, you wouldn't say you don't have convictions.
No, of course not. But I don't find people criticizing my convictions or asking me for more data or ridiculing me offensive. The ridicule, I normally agree with them and laugh along. For more facts, if I've got time, I'll provide them. And if somebody, after listening to my arguments, still doesn't agree with me, first of all, they're wrong, and I pity them. And second of all, you know, there's nothing I can do about that. And it's not really going to dramatically improve or degrade my quality of life by continuing to try to persuade them of what is obviously true after I've done everything that I can. To lay out the arguments. So if somebody, you know, is robust in their criticism or in their denial or in their ridicule, I don't get offended by that. I sometimes see it as a challenge. If there's somebody who's worth debating, I will sometimes invest in that process. Otherwise, you know, you know what it is. I find a lot of this debating and a lot of the joy in all of this, because I tend to approach most of these intellectual battles and these battles of charisma and ego as a game rather than a war. I treat it as fun rather than as conflict. And a lot of the social justice warriors on the other side, the bad guys, are furious, angry, earnest, you know, frothing half-wits. And what annoys them more than anything else, they're not very bright. What annoys them more than anything else is if you refuse to engage with the same level of anger, which is of course what they want. So they can accuse you of being some sort of, you know, frothing reactionary. What they want is for you to be angry or to snap at them or to lose your temper and say something that they can say, see, I told you he was a misogynist. He just said, you know, calm down, dear. You know, how patronizing can you get? I don't respond in that way. I respond first by laughing along at myself and then by laughing at them, and they don't like that very much.
Yeah, it seems to me the sort of, I mean, it's fair to say the growing following that is happening, you know, of you and your work and what you're talking about and these issues. I mean, it's almost like, I think from my experience, it's almost like watching these debates and these interactions. It's almost like, you know, living vicariously through what you do and going, oh my God, I wish I could be one of those kind of people, that, because you have this like don't give a shit mentality where it's like you honestly walk into these conversations with the idea that you've got nothing to lose. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, and it's because I don't have anything to lose. I don't have a dog in the fight when I debate a feminist because I don't want to have sex with women. I don't have, you know, skin in the game. I don't have to be polite. I can, you know, nobody wants to be that guy. Nobody wants to be the one who says, yeah, well, you know, actually, sorry, I don't mean to be rude, sorry to mansplain, but these campus rape statistics, not so much. Or, you know, the wage gap, actually, the economics are a bit dodgy behind that. Nobody wants to be that guy. You'd never get laid again. You know, if you were married, you wouldn't have sex for a month. Nobody wants to be that guy. So it takes a gay guy to do it. And it takes a gay guy to rock up and say, you know what, you crazy bitches, stop bullying your boyfriends, because sooner or later they're going to turn around and say, you ain't worth it, and they're leaving. You know, and if you don't start being a bit nicer to men, you are going to be the losers. And I think it took a homosexual, I suppose, to say that. And I really don't care about hurting their feelings. I don't care about anyone's feelings. I don't care about causing offense, because I don't really understand what it means. And I don't care about people when they say that that I've offended them or hurt their feelings. What I care about is facts and data and research and the truth. I care about reality. And when I see the media describing a world that does not conform to reality, does not conform to the studies, does not conform to the facts. When I see the media essentially lying to people day after day, knowingly lying, not just being incompetent, but being outright malicious, mendacious, being this goes way beyond negligence and into malice. When I see this from the media that ought to be sticking up for the little guy, ought to be telling the truth ought to be describing the world as it really is, then I take issue. And those are the subjects on which I choose to write and to speak out. And I don't have anything to lose. I'm social justice proof. They can't get me on anything. They can't get me fired. The last time they came for me, I got a promotion. They just can't ruin my life by making false allegations about me. I get called. There is no kind of bigotry I have not been accused of in the last week. And it happens every week. And it will happen every week for the rest of my life. And it's happened every week for the last 2 years. And I don't care. And this is what they don't understand, what they find so infuriating about me, and how they haven't worked out how to beat me yet. I hope they never do. I don't know how to beat me either. But I hope they never work it out, because I don't know what it's going to be. But they get so angry that none of their usual strategies seem to work on me. They can't lie about me. They can't derail me. They can't dig up shit about me. They can't ridicule me. They can't they can't accuse me. They can't get me on anything. And they're so used to writing off speakers instead of engaging with their arguments that when I start, dropping truth bombs or machine gunning them with facts, they just crumble. And this is what happened in Bristol. It's what happens every time on Sky News on the TV. It's what happens every time I get one of them in a room and actually ask her to justify her crazy opinions, or indeed his crazy opinions, of course, because there is a bizarre phenomenon you may be aware of known as the male feminist, which we'll perhaps get into later.
It's funny because I talked a little bit about feminism with Gavin as well, and one of the reasons I'm so glad to connect with you and with Gavin as well is because I admittedly found myself starting to fall into these traps and these beliefs, these platitudes, these ideals that, don't be mean kind of thing. And it's so refreshing to hear these logical comebacks and responses, because I'm like, wait a minute, I said it, I guess it's a good way to transition into the second part of what we want to talk about, which is atheism. I was, I guess, a huge fan of Ricky Gervais. He's obviously in the UK as well, and he came out.
Sorry to hear that.
I know. I'm in recovery. It's fine.
He was very funny for 6 months many years ago.
Well, yeah. Anyway, he came out with the show Derek, and it was all about kindness and kindness is magic and blah blah blah. And I watched the pilot episode and sort of found myself teary-eyed at this kind of ideal, and you sort of walk away going, and you just, I'm a bit of an emotional person, admittedly, but I have no issue admitting that.
You sound like such a sweetie. Poor Gavin beating you up for your for going on camera, and now I'm about to beat you up for atheism. All right, no, but carry on.
No. Oh, well, I'm not an atheist, obviously, so I'm not. But these ideals that we sort of spout, kind of, it's these sort of things that are hard to argue with. It's like, well, of course kindness is a good idea, but what does it look like? And you seem to be this kind of person that comes along and goes, hang on, let's talk about this and let's break down the nuances of it and actually put some action to these feel good, because I think most of these liberal ideals are just about people who want to walk away feeling better about themselves, right?
Yes, of course. So much of it is virtue signaling. And what's really interesting is that so much of the modern social justice phenomenon is fueled by that sort of egoistic atheist perspective, where the only God on the planet is you. This sort of runaway, rampant humanism. The only God is you, and it's sort of driven by narcissism so often, because the moral structure that you erect around yourself exists primarily to satisfy your own ego and your own demand for affirmation from others. The dopamine circuits in your brain and the social reward circuits that remind you that you're a good person, that you're a righteous, upstanding, sort of morally virtuous kind of person. All of this is from where social justice comes from. And what's really interesting is the response to all this, and there will be a response to it fairly soon. The backlash against, the racial grievance politics in America, against the feminists on campus, against social justice warriors of all stripes, is going to be a uniquely Christian response. It's going to be a return. It's going to be a move away from arrogance and that cult of the self and the sort of arrogance of the social justice lunatic, back to a more sort of a more Christian humility and openness. It's going to be a move away from the sort of furious ignorance of Black Lives Matter protesters and into compassion and love. And it's a very interesting sort of thing that's happening now, as you start to see people sounding like Christians, even if they don't realize they are, as they try to struggle through their objections to social justice, or they try to explain to you what they find objectionable about campus feminists, and they begin in the language that they use, which is about intellectual humility and compassion and searching for truth. They sound remarkably like people of faith, even if they wouldn't describe themselves like that.
Yeah. It's funny, I think it was with Dave Rubin, you sort of described atheists as, thin-skinned and easy to wind up. And that was funny.
Oh, they're the best. They're the best.
It was so funny to hear you say that, because I grew up in a very religious environment, which was a world where there was this sort of this underlying idea that atheists are completely logical and reasonable, and that it was almost this intimidating, and that they were on this higher level than us, and then someone like you comes along and goes, oh, they're just, you sort of just laugh them off, and I'm just like,
no, they have no... Look, people... These are sort of professional atheists, like Reddit atheists, the militant type atheists. Whether or not they believe in God is quite far down the list of characteristics. They first of all have to wear socks and sandals. They then have to, have phenomenally thin skin, like hair trigger temper, wispy beards, and normally ginger ponytails, and there's all sorts of characteristics that these people have before you get to whether or not they believe in God. Whether or not they believe in God is almost the least important thing about atheists. They're extraordinarily thin-skinned, and they're arrogant, obnoxious, self-righteous, superficially factual claims to some kind of devastating truth about the world, about how the world is. Well, first of all, they don't stand up to scrutiny in the final analysis, or at the bare minimum, you get to a point where you have to just, take the leap of faith or not, in which case there's not really logic cannot really speak to that. And second of all, you look at the world that the atheists have created. Look at what's happened to culture since the churches weren't running things. You look at St. Peter's Basilica and compare it to Tracy Emin and Damien Hirst. You look at the glories and wonders of Islamic architecture and compare that to, abstract expressionism, much as I like Rothko on occasion. You look at the great wonders of the architectural, musical, philosophical, and literary worlds and compare that to the drivel and tripe and crap that modern artists and modern art galleries put out now. And this sort of awful state of public morality, the terrible lack of belief and trust and faith in institutions and history and family and society and in each other, the sort of skepticism and suspicion with which we all regard each other, and tell me that atheism has built a better world, because I don't see it.
Yeah, it's funny because I've sort of heard the sort of argument put forward that, and I've experienced it to be true, I think, in that, in atheism's absolute rejection of religion and focus on religion to sort of deconstruct it, what it's ended up doing essentially is mirror it, like to emulate it.
Of course. Well, there's nobody more dogmatic than an atheist.
Yeah, right. It's really funny. So, quick story about an experience I had with an atheist online. So, I, as I say, grew up very religious. I was actually involved with, this is how kind of zealous I was. I was involved with street, preaching and, actively trying to convert people to Christianity. And I came across a guy, he's an atheist, who calls himself a street epistemologist. So, what it essentially is, another word, he's trying to convert people to atheism, essentially. So he goes out with his little camera and he interviews these people, and he sort of asks them these very, what he deems as open-minded questions, which in reality are completely leading questions. Like, he's like, on a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you in your beliefs? And he's sort of trying to trap them in this kind of corner sort of thing. And it's really, I actually told him through Twitter, I was like, this is cringeworthy to watch. Like, it's, he's trying to come across as like really open-minded, and, And again, this whole sort of ideal of like, oh, we're critical thinking and logical and reasonable. And, the moment I started disagreeing with him and challenging what he does, he just completely shut me down. He's like, oh, well, I don't think this conversation's going anywhere, blah, blah, blah. I was like, wow, cool. Like, for someone who's trying to get other people to be really open-minded, like, yeah, good way, good way to
Aren't they proselytizers? Aren't they? They're like missionaries, atheists, aren't they? They're determined to convert you.
Yeah.
Literally every criticism they have ever leveled at religion is more true of them. Whether it's dogmatism or blind faith or or the need to convert or the damage done to society, and everything that they say about religion is more true of them. They are thin-skinned, hypocritical weirdos. And look, I don't mind if somebody doesn't believe in God. Frankly, I don't care. But when they turn into the this sort of, maybe I should care. I don't know. I probably should care. I should be out there.
I think subconsciously you do that.
Well, I probably do, but don't tell anyone. Maybe I should be out on the street with leaflets and a megaphone, but it's not my style. I prefer YouTube. But I sort of don't care if somebody doesn't believe in God or not. It's but what I find endlessly entertaining is when you sort of do a little 5-minute segment, as I did with Dave Rubin, maybe 8 minutes, saying basically, atheists are so thin-skinned. I mean, aren't they just funny to wind up? And then you get in the comment sections, how dare you say we're thin-skinned?
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing.
This is typical sort of religious bigotry. How dare you say we're thin-skinned? And I just...
There's so much irony in that.
There's a lack of irony there, unseen since the height of the religious right in America.
Yeah.
There is a lack of self-awareness there, like I've never seen. And I just find them very funny, very angry people who, you know what it is. I've read some studies on this, and many of your listeners will find this offensive, but as we've established previously in the show, I couldn't give a shit. You give me license to swear now. You told me.
Gavin, go nuts.
Yeah, you see. I'm not going to drop the C-bomb on you, but there may be some Fs coming. No, I'll try to avoid them. I'm sorry. I've lost my thread. What was I going to tell you about? Oh yes, I've seen some studies that show a high degree of correlation between autism and atheism. So if you're the sort of person that can't really relate to others, you might be quite smart, but you don't really understand feelings or emotions or how to relate to other human beings, you're far more likely to be an atheist. Now, this rings very true to me. If you look at how religious people behave, the sort of communitarian, so the parish aspect of worship, the whole concept of the congregation, the way in which religious people tend to look out for one another, look after one another, back one another up. There's a wonderful, strong sense of community in almost every religion is about community, and is its secondary or tertiary tenet is about the flock, the faith, community, whatever. And it's not surprising to me that people with autism or on that spectrum somewhere retreat into atheism because they don't understand other people, because they can't wrap their heads around the compassion and empathy and love that is required for faith. So in a sense, not for all people obviously, but in a sense, I think there's a large proportion of atheists are really only atheists as a function of a psychiatric condition they have, which is that they can't relate to other people. Yeah. Atheism, according to that reading, is a sort of brain disease. It's as if you can't relate to other people. You don't understand human emotions. You have to learn them like a sociopath. And you sort of retreat into atheism because you see no value in altruism or compassion, love, community, or understanding with your fellow man. Well, yeah, of course, you're going to retreat into this dull, lifeless, pointless, anodyne, ugly, empty, vacuous creed of atheism.
I would love my podcast to be like bigger right now, so that some news media would pick up on that line you just said, that Milo Yiannopoulos says atheism is a brain disease.
Well, if you let me embed this, I'll write a column about it.
Oh, please do. I think that that could be a bumper sticker. So yeah, I mean, I guess sort of just I guess winding down a little bit, talking specifically about, I grew up in the Christian faith, and there is obviously this sort of, similar. Again, I'm not huge in politics and things like that, but there is a sort of left and right conversation going on within religion as well. This, liberal versus conservative and whatnot. And, I've sort of, it's funny because with people like yourself, I've sort of had to rethink a lot of these, when the whole sort of gay marriage thing was passed in America, I was like, oh yeah, I've got a couple of family members who are gay, and I was just like, oh, good for them, they can do what they want, and stuff like that. And then you kind of get someone like you come along and kind of question it as a gay person yourself, and I'm just like, wait a minute, like maybe I haven't actually thought about this at all.
Well, I'll tell you what's going on. You, as a Christian, as a decent human being, have a highly developed sense of empathy, compassion, understanding, love, and tolerance. And it's atheists. I mean, there is one major world religion out there that does not share those characteristics that listeners can work out for themselves. But certainly in the Christian faiths and most of the Eastern faiths and all the rest of it, the sort of peace, love, and understanding is pretty much the name of the game. And what you've done, I think, is take on some of the understandable misapprehensions in society. If you want to be a caring, loving person, then you must believe X, Y, Z, right? If you want to be this is the messages that the media sends us, and the messages that our culture sends us.
Right.
If you are not a hateful bigot, which no Christian ever wants to think of themselves as, then you must agree with gay marriage. Well, actually, there are sometimes more subtle and more important ways to be compassionate, and often, religious love doesn't look exactly like love between two people. It can be more complex and challenging than that. And sometimes the most compassionate thing to do is not always the easiest thing to do. And Christians and conservatives instinctively understand this in a way that liberals never have, because they are lazy slaves to their own narcissistic feelings. But sometimes it's not easy to do the right thing. It's more tempting to do the flattering thing that's going to get you congratulations from your peers. And when the media is so uniform, and all of the messages we get from culture, from the academy, and from the media all tell us that that route A is the route to compassion, and route B is the route to hatred and bigotry. It's easy even for Christian folk to wander down the wrong alley briefly. So I understand completely how this has happened to you, but a little critical thinking and a little perspective can sometimes make you realise. I mean, it's the same thing with this Gamergate thing I've been reporting on. The sort of these evil sociopathic feminists beating up on guys who just want to be left alone to play games. And there's no evidence that games make you more violent, make you more sexist. They're perfectly fun, cool thing to do in your spare time.
My older brother plays video games. What they do is make you boring.
Well, I mean, it's maybe no bad thing. So it doesn't turn you into a feminist. But this sort of the easy thing to do is to agree with the feminists when they say these games, have negative stereotypes about women, unhelpful depictions of the female form, that they encourage boys to be, to be sexist and misogynist. And the easy and what feels on the surface like the compassionate thing to do is to agree with them and to say, well, yes, of course we should treat women better, because everybody wants to treat women nicely, because nobody wants to be an asshole. But actually, those things are based on lies, and in fact the real victims aren't always who you think they are. And a little bit more critical thinking and a bit more application of the sort of rigorous critical process can reveal things to you about what the media is telling you that will surprise you.
It's interesting to me because I've recently had two sort of prominent authors that I really kind of respect. Both, one of them sort of casually identified as a feminist, and the other just recently interviewed someone on the podcast to do with Black Lives Matter, and I was like, are you kidding me? I was like, oh my gosh, and it reminds me of what you talk about, this whole sort of narrative over fact idea that liberals just buy into the, like you say, with the whole gay marriage thing, for example, how can you say you're a loving, kind person and be against gay marriage? It's this narrative that you, like you say, it's A or B. You can't, there's no nuance, right? And it's,
well, they set this up for you on purpose because they want you to fail. They want you to fall totally in line with the acceptable public prescription of what a good person looks like. And if you deviate from that path, you are a heretic and you must be burned. It's very interesting how closely mapped on to the worst stereotypes of religion the social justice phenomenon is. If you look at white male patriarchy, for example, the idea that that straight white men today have to pay for the sins of their ancestors. Well, Does that sound familiar to you? Because I seem to remember something about that, and it's called original sin. And and I'm fine. I'm a Catholic, so like I should be okay with it. But it's remarkable in both the ritualistic aspect and also in just how the belief system is structured, how closely onto, as I say, not any real religion, because religions are compassionate and loving and social justice isn't, but onto at least the worst stereotypes of religion.
Yeah. Well, this is what sort of, I guess this is the audience that I'm aiming to speak to, is the people, like myself, who out of good intention almost got caught up in these ideals. Like, I just this title of there's this book that's just been released in this sort of progressive Christian circle to do with the whole Black Lives Matter thing, and I'm sure you'll get a kick out of the title. But the book is basically called "Towards the Other America: Anti-Racist Resources for White People Taking Action for Black Lives Matter." Oh, it's like that's so incredible, like anti-racist resources for white people.
I don't need any tips on not being racist, but thanks. Like I don't need my children or to attend compulsory consent classes in university. They don't need to be taught how not to be a rapist. I don't need to be taught how not to be a racist, and most men don't need to be taught how not to be sexist. What happens, the left has got what Douglas Murray calls a supply and demand problem. It is desperate to find bigotry and hatefulness wherever it looks, but there aren't enough bigots and hateful people around, so it has to invent them. Yeah. And it does it by broadening the definitions of sexism. So we discover these things like microaggressions and manspreading and mansplaining, turning sexism into an ever more humiliating and preposterous search for ever more tiny perceived infractions of some ethical feminist code of conduct. And we do the same thing with racism, with microaggressions. We do the same thing with the broadening definition of sexual assault and sexual harassment on campuses, where unwanted advances can now be classed practically as rape, but certainly as sexual assault, and that's codified into the codes of conduct in most of the big universities all over the Western world. Actually, that's becoming the norm, if it's not already. These things are designed to trip you up, as we said earlier. If you don't toe the line with all of it, with what is sometimes goes beyond just counterintuitive and into downright wacky, like racism is somehow different when it's directed to black people and to white people, or whatever it is they're saying this week. This power plus privilege equation. I mean, the only maths that progressives can actually do are these ridiculous equations about how privilege plus power equals patriarchy, whatever it is. I mean, they don't understand maths, so their equations make no sense either, but they at least make a good effort at it. This stuff is all designed basically to catch you out, to discover the heretics. And as I say, that's what leads us on to this observation that they really are just the new religious intolerance.
Yeah. I guess just in closing, I'd be keen to sort of wrap up in regards to, like, I think it was on one of your live streams that I heard a bit of a conversation with a girl that I think she did identify as a feminist, but then she was like a filmmaker, I think, a document.
Cassie J.
Yeah. So I was curious to hear about that. So, like, on a pragmatic sort of level, like, are you slowly starting to come across stories of people that are, sort of being exposed to what you're talking about and having a change of heart or a change of direction?
Oh, for sure. And there's one thing that will turn people away from feminism, and it's facts. And when anybody, from that world who believe, I think Cassie wouldn't mind me saying, I think she was probably in the same position. She thought of herself as a upstanding, right-thinking member of, society. She was a feminist. When she actually started meeting men in the men's rights movement, when she started examining some of the critical claims of feminism, she discovered that it wasn't, or the world was not as she had been told. And she had a sort of Damascene conversion, to put it in terms your listeners will appreciate. And she now has completely done a 180, and at least so it seems. She wouldn't describe herself as a men's rights activist, I'm sure, but she certainly sympathizes with very many of their complaints. And I'm not a men's rights activist. I'm not going to stand here and stick up for those guys. Sometimes they're not particularly pleasant. Sometimes they're great, whatever. But the point is that she is, strayed from the path of feminism. And as a result, just like, intolerant religious people from all periods in history. She has been ostracized from the church. She's been excommunicated from feminism. All of her funding and support dried up, and I wrote an article about her that raised her $200,000. So that was a success. That was
that
great.
the one where you had to sing from Titanic, or?
No, that was a different occasion.
That was beautiful, by the way.
No, it wasn't, because I had a very sore throat, like I do today. But so I'm not going.
I wasn't going to ask you to sing. That's fine.
No, good. Don't, because it's not going to happen. But no, that was a separate fundraising effort. I think we raised 50,000 that time. I'm trying to do these things sparingly because I don't want to spend all of my capital on this stuff. But there's so many good causes around at the moment that don't get attention because journalists lie to you. They don't get attention because these professional feminist activists lie to you. And what Cassie J discovered is that the world is not as she had been told. And she now is putting the finishing touches to a documentary that is going to enrage and infuriate all sorts of people on the modern authoritarian progressive left, which is, I think,
amazing.
Well, whether you give a shit about gender issues or not, I think that's cause for celebration, because it's about time somebody spoke back to them.
Yeah. So I guess just sort of in closing, what's next for Milo? What's happening in your world? Like, are you writing or doing any traveling
World
or speaking?
domination.
Yeah. Where do we find you? Where's the best place to go to?
Like the gay Blofeld. Well, you can find me on Twitter. I'm at Nero, like the Emperor, who was awesome aside from the Christian burning thing. In all other ways,
just that small thing.
Just that small biographical hiccup. Otherwise, it was great. So you can find me on Twitter at Nero. I have a column at Breitbart. I try to write 5 times a day. I'm all over the internet. Very difficult to miss.
Very prolific on Twitter as well.
I am. I'm on there all day. It is the best and worst thing in my life.
I do wonder what else you do sometimes when I see how many times you retweet things.
Well, it's sort of always open, I'm sort of always batting backwards and forwards, and because I work such long hours, it looks like I don't do much else, but of course I get lots of other things done. Next year I've got a book coming out, about video games, and yes, lots more columns, TV appearances. You should look out for me. A lot more American media appearances coming up in the next 12 months, and I'm also doing a tour, which I'm calling the Dangerous Faggot Tour.
Beautiful.
Well, you see, I keep getting banned from university campuses, so I've decided that I like to post this picture of me in Beverly Hills with champagne and cigarettes in a embroidered purple Ralph Lauren shirt, sort of laughing very
I know the picture
obnoxiously.
you're talking about.
Yeah, and I like to, when they ban me from university campuses, I like to say, who will protect the students from this dangerous faggot, just to sort of humiliate and embarrass them, and to remind them that they're not banning an IRA leader, they're banning some gay dude who doesn't agree with feminism. Anyway, so I've called my tour the Dangerous Faggot Tour, and I'm going to be going through lots of UK and US universities over the next 12 months, talking about all sorts of different things. Lots of new tour dates being added all the time. It's at yiannopoulos.net/tour. You'll have to Google Milo Yiannopoulos. It will correct your spelling for you, and then you can copy and paste it into the subject line. And it is Yiannopoulos. I need to get a better URL. It is yiannopoulos.net/tour. Or you can probably just Google Milo Yiannopoulos tour, and you will discover some of the dates that have been announced so far, many more dates being announced over the next couple of months for next year. So if you are in North America or Europe, I'm probably coming to you sometime soon. And down in lovely New Zealand and Australia, you may have to wait till the following year, but I'm sure we will see you at some point.
Yeah, that sounds great. That'd be awesome. We need you, Milo. We need you.
There's a great thing about the internet. I don't need to be there in person. I can.
Come on. It's nothing like being in the same room,
I will write to some universities and see if I can get myself an invitation.
Yeah, totally. Awesome. Hey, thanks so much for connecting and doing this. It's been such a great conversation. So,
thank you for having me. It's been delightful.
Cool. Awesome. So I'll just stop the